want to hear information about Nigeria. Would also want to have interactive question time to be able to make clarifications, ask questions, find out opportunities and potentials that are in Nigeria. So the session we have very quick. We have limited time, so we'll try to make it quick. We're going to be starting. I'll give a brief address on background from the Renewable Energy Association of Nigeria, which I'm the president of. Then we would have Barbara talk to us about what the Rural Electrification Agency is doing in Nigeria, about the programs that are running through Rural Electrification Agency. Then from there, we begin to go into opportunities and other stuff in Nigeria with the panelists. And that's how we go around it. I believe we're going to have a very interesting time. So right now I'm going to invite Barbara to come and talk to us about the activities of Rural Electrification Agency of Nigeria, programs that are happening right now, opportunities, and other things that you may want to know about Nigeria. Barbara, please. Yeah, no, you could do it from there also.
Hi everyone, good afternoon or good morning or evening, depending on where you're joining from. So great to be here on a Nigerian session with these very important people around me. So I'll go through the slides. Great. I introduce myself again, Barbara Zillen, Senior Advisor to the MD, and I head the program called the Solar Power Niger program that seeks to provide access to funding to developers in Nigeria. Okay. Vision of the REA is to achieve universal access to affordable and sustainable electricity. I think that's, what it is for REA. We want to also electrify unserved and underserved communities in the country, promote rural electrification in the country, and also administer the Rural Electrification Fund, promote support and provide electrification through public and private sector partnerships, which is very important. We have some aspirations for 2030. Is it 2030 already?
No.
Good thing. So we still have some time. Summary of the programs under the REA, like I mentioned, we have the Rural Electrification Fund. It's a fund with funding from the government to provide capital subsidies for projects. This operates more like a PPP structure. We have the capital projects and annual budget where the government allocates funding annually for the construction of major projects like grid extension projects, mini grids, street lights, solar home systems, productive use solar home systems, the large capacity and the smaller capacity of the energy equipment for the productive use, and other interventions in the country. We have the program called Solar Power Niger program, which I manage. That's a platform where we bring investors and the developers together and we'll match make them to ensure we have sustainable transactions. We have a program called the Nigeria Electrification Project. This project has credit facility from the World Bank and the AFDB to the tune of $550 million. Most of it is used as result-based funding, more like a grant. After you have deployed, you can claim the grant. And we have other components of the projects that are not result-based, actually. We have the Energizing Education Program. The first one was funded by the government, where we provided renewable energy solutions to institutions, federal institutions. Second program for the EEP is being funded by the World Bank. The third is being funded through the credit facility from the AFDB. And the fourth one, we're still seeking funding for it. We have more, but we just put them in these four categories as the first pilot projects. We have the EEI, Energizing Economies Initiatives, where we encourage developers to fund these markets, right? Markets or economic clusters, and provide energy and make it more sustainable. We have a program called the Energizing Agriculture program funded by GAP. This program does something different, which is they go to agro clusters and try to design business models towards energizing these agro clusters. So we have different agro clusters in the country, thousands of them. They assess the energy needs and they look at viable business models that can be deployed in those clusters. The African Mini Grid program is funded by UNDP and Jeff. This program seeks to build mini grids in different locations in the country. Maybe probably fund 50 or 40% of the mini grids. Still in the early stages, they just started, so they're still designing a program. The other program, De-risking Sustainable Off-Grid Lighting Solutions, is doing something similar but for the solar home systems. I know it's a lot of programs, but yeah, we have the Jigawa Energy City, still at feasibility stage. Korean Electrification project. It's an in-kind support of the federal government where they are helping construct mini grids within the FCT. And then we have the program called IMAS, Interconnected Mini Grid Acceleration Scheme, where the GIZ is providing in-kind support to a number of developers towards the partnership with the utility companies, where the developers generate electricity and then utility companies supporting the distribution of that electricity. Bottom line is, in the partnership together, we've started the implementation of this project and it's still being implemented currently. Okay. Good. We try not to say the number, but there's some research that says about 90 million people in Nigeria are underserved. I see problems as opportunity. Like I always say, don't waste a good problem or don't waste a good crisis. This is a crisis in the country, but it's also an opportunity to partner with investors. And that's the reason why we have a lot of developers in the country. They are also trying to provide solutions towards meeting this need or this demand in the country. We have a number of businesses, significant number of businesses that are currently running on diesel and will be happy to convert to a renewable source that is more sustainable. Like I said in a session yesterday, the competition is generators. It's not the grid. If you make the competition the grid, then it's you start talking about affordability issues. But if you realize that the competition are the diesel gensets, then you realize that there's no competition or there's no comparison. There's a clear case for the business and it's easy to make a justification around the business model. Again, the rural population is growing. The population in Nigeria is growing. Today, we say it's over 200 million. Who knows what it is if we do take a count now. It's a growing population. We have a number of supports from the World Bank, from the USAID, GIZ, from the UN through SC for All, UNDP, AFDB. Some are credit facilities to the government, some are through transaction advisory support, and some are in-kind support. We have also the Korean government as well. We have all these supports and we need more support. And there are opportunities to do way more than we are currently doing now. As you know, Nigerian market is large and it's hard to meet the demand. No matter how much you put in, it just takes it in because we have an increased potential that haven't even been tapped into yet. So we have a number of industries that are not being operational because of their energy needs are not currently met. So we have huge opportunities. Here are some of the challenges. Like I said earlier, when we talk about challenges, we're talking about opportunities. Affordability, right pricing, viable business models for the mini grids. Sustainability is key. We spoke about that yesterday. Ensuring that the project can actually run through its life, the life cycle of the project, without it trying to scramble for, financing to continue its operations. And we realized that in doing that, PU is key, productive use is key, and there are different things that could fall into the productive use category actually. Most times when you say productive, everyone's thinking about agriculture. Healthcare is productive use. Education is productive use, right? Because you're using it to power the institution and you're educating people, and people are paying school fees for that. So there are different ways that you could design a sustainable model around these interventions. Currency is a big major concern because a lot of the equipment are being imported into the country. There's significant demand for local manufacturing or local assembly in the country. Mismatch of currency, people are getting dollar funding and they're generating their revenues in Naira. So that is a challenge. However, like I said, there's opportunity for people to give funding in the local currency, which would also help that issue. So I'm talking about the challenges and the opportunities at the same time. Quality of products, we, as the REA, we have minimum specifications for the products that get the grants, and also even for the government deployment, we still do have minimum specifications. Yeah, and access to finance, high cost of finance. We need more impact funds in the space, and we need more patient capital. That's very key. Patient capital that can run 7 to 10 years versus looking to exit in 2 years, which stresses the business model for a lot of the developers. I'll try to stop here so it's more interactive, but basically saying we're doing a lot, but we can do a lot more. We have a lot of expertise in the space, but there's room to learn more. There are new technologies that can make it better, and we're open to those collaborations. And government is doing significant work, but like I said, the private sector will drive sustainability of most of these government initiatives. And what the government has been doing lately is pilots, proof of concepts, so that the private sector can then come and scale it up. So with that, I'll hand over to the moderator. Thank you.
Bro, that was good. Thanks for recapping all the things we are doing right now. I'm going to move to Prince. Prince Ajaboli is the CEO for Rensus, and I want you to tell us how Rensus in Nigeria is leveraging its expertise and experience to drive growth, and what are the potentials that are within the space where Rensus currently operates.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. So I would try, firstly I would talk about Rensus, so there's a background. So when I start talking about the opportunities and the challenges so firstly, Rensus obviously is it's domiciled in Nigeria, operates in Lagos, and in terms of our stretch of what we have done, we've been in the SHS, mini-grid, and also in the CNI space. Quite lately we have moved to becoming CNI players, so in the CNI space, right? So I would particularly try to focus on what the opportunities and challenges are in the CNI space. So maybe start with the opportunities. One very clear thing is Nigeria is, of course, the largest economy in Africa, right? So that has to count for something in terms of opportunity. 200 million people, that's arguable. I think it's a bit more than that. There is, of course, 200 million people, a lot of businesses, so there's energy demand. There are a lot of studies that has helped to size. I think the most recent I can recollect is the Bloomberg NEF study in 2019 that I think tries to estimate for CNI, tries to estimate the total demand of CNI in Nigeria alone as about 1,500 megawatts. and also one of the opportunities, which is, because I'll just take a cue from Barbara, because as you mentioned the challenges, it's obviously almost an opportunity, right? You have very, not in terms of availability of the grid, right? It's somewhat minimal, so that creates an opportunity for alternative source of energy, and that's why a lot of players are in the space, and good work you've had that the RA is trying to do, and several stakeholders are trying to put in place. I think the other thing too is, in terms of the price of energy. So in the time past, there has been, from a regulatory standpoint, is not been excessively complex for Nigeria, but of late, I think there's been an awakening, if I would use that word, from a regulatory standpoint. So there are a lot of parastatals, regulators, or regulatory bodies being created from time to time to address what the government thinks is, are the challenges. For instance, not up until recently, right? You had the one utility company, right? It was just one for the whole nation. But now it's been broken down into pseudo regions, and those regions can basically manage what they think is unique to that region in terms of the tariff structure, etc. Now, how that impacts on the tariff commercially, before tariffs, utility tariffs were generally low, and that's the blessing and the cost. The cost side is that if you take it higher, then it becomes quite difficult for people to get used to the fact that electricity can be more expensive, or should be more expensive. However, that's happening gradually, and it gives birth to the business case of CNI. So there are two major points, or major value proposition that CNI, especially CNI solar, gives is the cost of electricity produced by a CNI player in Nigeria is way lower than the grid. So that's, in terms of commercial competitiveness, you're super fantastic on that point. The second is availability. So a lot of businesses, especially the ones that have impact on the real economy, like manufacturing, etc., it really need to work with reliable grid, and the grid not very reliable at this time. A reliable source of electricity, it becomes dependable. So if you go to your typical manufacturing company in Nigeria, you'll see that they don't use the grid. So maybe they use the grid, but for more like maybe powering the admin section of the factory, but the core factory runs on a diesel engine or a gas engine. Okay, and of course diesel is super expensive. So you have, in those two ways, there's a very huge value proposition and a very huge market for CNI in Nigeria, and I think also that somewhat repeats itself in some of the other geographies in Africa. So yeah, that's not so short summary of the market. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prince. Yeah, I think I heard clearly for the CNI space in Nigeria. Yes, we have the very big potential because, like Barbara said, the competition is not the grid. The competition is a self-generated power from the diesel generators or gas generators. So pitching as renewable energy developers, we are actually pitching, in terms of commercial viability versus what the customers are paying for those other alternatives. I want to move to Olu, the CEO of Ashipa Electric. Olu, I want you to talk to us about what Ashipa is doing in Nigeria, the space you're playing in the renewable energy sector, and what are the potentials
and the opportunities that you can see in this space.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Again, my name is Olu Ajala, and I'll give a brief introduction on Ashipa Electric and then jump right into answering your question. So Ashipa Electric, we deploy solar and battery storage-based microgrids to help homeowners and businesses reduce their cost of power while maintaining reliability and resiliency. By so doing, we're also stimulating economic activities and impacting many lives, hopefully millions of lives. Now, to answer your question specifically, I'll just give a brief, just kind of history of electrification and its impact. Over the past century, the idea of electrification involved large generation, thousands of miles of transmission and distribution lines before power is delivered to homeowners and businesses. Unfortunately, some parts of the world have not been able to develop as fast. For example, France developed re-electrified after World War II within 20 years, Germany within 30 years. But some parts of the world have not been able to muster the amount of funds or dedication to be able to bring in electrification across the entire territory. For Nigeria specifically, as Barbara showed earlier, about 110 million people are connected to the grid, 90 million are not connected. Now, those 110 that are connected, majority of them probably get electricity maybe 40% of the time. And if they do get the electricity, it's not as reliable and resilient. So there's opportunity across the board. But I want to focus in on the 90 million and also those commercial activities within those off-grid communities, because there's a lot of commercial activities. There's potentially mining, there is agriculture and the likes. So where is the opportunity for mini-grids? Well, in these communities, when we look at energy as a catalyst for economic development, then we'll truly see the opportunity in these communities. But if we look at power as just providing for the good of, just for the good of it, then it'll be tough to see the viability in it. So why don't we look at power as a means of catalyzing mining activities, agricultural activities, because across the globe there's always going to be a need of things that are available in most of these communities. So that therein lies where the opportunity is for mini grids. For us, Ashipa Electric, wherever we go into to develop mini grids, we look for active, productive activities where there's, whether it's cassava processing, whether it's palm production, and we look at how can we come in, provide power for the off-takers, and also leverage that as anchor for powering the rest of the community. And that way, we're able to find reliable projects. Not everywhere will that be possible. So in some other areas, we want to look at how we can partner with productive, with entities that participate in productive activities, go into that community together, they bring in the production, stimulating farming activities in that community, and then we can bring in the power and cooperate together to build something out of nothing within those communities. And that's where the opportunity is. Overall, estimate, as Barbara showed earlier, about 14 billion business spent $14 billion on fuel, diesel generator. That cuts across, whether it's urban, peri-urban, or rural. And it's most likely even more than that when you look at where those places that are not counted in the rural areas. Can that diesel generator be replaced with solar and storage? Yes. In some cases, they spend upwards of 60 to 70 cents per kilowatt hour, whereas well-optimized solar storage and diesel backup system can reduce that cost by 50 or 30 to 50%. That is opportunity to free in more capital for those businesses to operate more efficiently. That's the opportunity to reduce cost of energy for homeowners in those communities, and that's exactly the proposition that the opportunity that exists in this mini-grid area. So thank you, and I look forward to more discussion.
Thanks so much, Olu. I'm going to move to Simon right now. Simon's part's a bit very interesting because his technology is not like most of the common ones. Is on bio. And Simon, I want you to talk about what Progenesis is doing and the potentials you could see for the type of things Progenesis is doing in Nigeria and the magnitude of the space that you think you're playing in. What kind of support would you want? What kind of partnership would you want? And how would you want the world to see Nigeria through your lens?
Thank you very much, Ayo. Lovely to meet everybody today. Good afternoon. I'm Simon Igofosi. I'm the co-founder of Pyrogenesis and the co-inventor of the pyrochemy technology. It is an advanced thermal technology that is using pyrolysis to convert agricultural waste typically, but any combustible waste, but our focus is on agricultural waste and agri-processor waste into renewable electricity, renewable heat. It can also produce biofuels, biofertilizers, which are carbon-based biofertilizer. And when that biofertilizer is used, that carbon-based biofertilizer, it's removing carbon from the environment. So that means it is eligible for carbon credits, which we have sold for that reason. And that's where it's really interesting, because we can generate electricity, but at the same time we're generating electricity, we're also producing carbon credits. Too often, when we were first developing our technology, so we, Pyrogenesis are innovators. We have a patented technology. We wouldn't have a patented technology without the support that we've received. So Barbara, I think you need to update your slide for REA, because you need to get Alice Goodbrook, who's the program lead for Energy Catalyst, to send you the Energy Catalyst logo to put on there. Because Energy Catalyst have funded 25 organizations in Nigeria to bring new technologies that will create new solutions that will assist, developing completely new disruptive business models. Because everybody knows, if you're just going to build a solar mini-grid, and Nigeria is the world's largest mini-grid market according to the African Development Bank, it's tough to make profit. Hence, you've got to look for productive use, and you've got to look for all these other things, because, people's income, Nigeria's per capita consumption is 140 kilowatt hours per year. And how much do you sell a kilowatt hour for? So the investment, that goes in to the infrastructure, and then the amount you're going to get as a return, if you're just selling electricity to ordinary Nigerians, it's not going to make you profitable. So you have to develop something that generates profits in other ways. And so as a technology developer, we don't just develop the technologies, we also look at how can we develop value chains. And I think that's the key thing to make this whole market work. You have to have innovation. And innovation can be funded by organizations like Innovate UK and the Energy Catalyst program. It can be funded by all sorts of other programs. But you need innovators. You need new technologies. The Industrial Revolution wasn't necessarily an incremental change. It was a disruption. And it was due to the introduction of new technology. And that new technology created a massive boost in productivity. But if you know your history, and the Industrial Revolution really got going in the 1800s, mid-1800s, there was also a massive influx of capital. Now, those who know the history know where that capital came from as well. Yeah? It's in the British history, very much so. So you have to have people who have, and this could be ordinary people as well, who have access to very large amounts of capital. And where I'm sitting, I see that we're at that tipping point again. And what makes it interesting is that if you have a business model, or better still, if you have a technology that also provides carbon credits or carbon removal. Now, according to the World Bank, there's going to be, there needs to be about $20 trillion spent in the next 7 years on fighting climate change. So if your business model includes anything that helps fight climate change, and we're here talking about renewable solutions, so they should do, then people are going to be spending, in order to meet that target, somewhere in the world, $9 billion a second. That's quite a big opportunity. That $9 billion a second isn't flowing into the oil and gas industry anymore. It's flowing into business models and technologies and innovators that can show that they can deliver solutions that are going to decarbonize the way we do things, decarbonize our economies. So renewable energy is an excellent opportunity to bring those things together. So we sit in a very interesting space because our patented technology does do that. It provides renewable electricity, which populations need and industry needs. But industry also needs renewable heat. Heat is one of the most difficult things to decarbonize. Okay? And then, of course, agriculture. We've seen the price of fertilizers since the recent conflict shoot up because the supply chains have been affected. And those fertilizer manufacturing chains are typically based on the fossil fuel industry. So any and every opportunity that we can innovate, create new technologies, new business models that develop new value chains that decarbonize how we currently do life and build our economies, decouple that from carbon emissions. Yeah, that $20 trillion that price tag or investment ticket that the World Bank is saying needs to be spent in the next 7 years, $9 billion a second. Let's channel that into what we're doing. And we're going to transform. We'll see the next industrial revolution is based on giving communities, smallholder farming communities, the opportunity to add value to what they currently produce and get a fraction of the value in the value chain. So that's what Pyrogenesis is about. The Genesis part is about creating and new systems, especially circular economy systems, that are going to bring more of the wealth to smallholder farming communities, which are typically off-grid communities. So we're very happy to speak to mini-grid operators to help them look at how we can work together to make their business model more profitable in that respect.
Thanks, Simon. I see the circular part of it in the agro-processing has your stock feed. So which means it would be great if you can have nexus of your technology with the mini-grid developers who are working in agro-processing communities, whereby those agro-processing waste can become the stock feed for Simon's technology to create further weight and more complete the kind of cycle for a circular economy. I'm going to come back to you, Barbara. And the question is, what are the examples of successful public-private partnerships in the market that you've seen in Nigeria, and line the word successful? And how do companies work with the rural electrification agencies? For example, if we have some of our friends here who wants to do stuff with the rural electrification agency in Nigeria, how can they come in? We have companies who are not currently operating in Nigeria. Is there a desk in area that can help facilitate them coming to Nigeria and doing things with rural electrification agency?
I think, let's say it's red. So the first one is, do we have successful PPP models? Yes, we do. And instead of calling projects, I'll talk about the structure, right? The developers are here, so I'll try not to use anyone as, as an example. What's a good structure that works? One is a developer, and I'll talk about it from two ends. One from the REF perspective, Rural Education Fund perspective, and also from the NEP perspective. From the Rural Education Fund perspective, the government identifies a number of areas that ordinarily would not be profitable to developers, to the private sector. What do? They give capital subsidies on that, up to a maximum of 70%. And that encourages the developer to go to a particular site that they ordinarily not go to. With that capital subsidy, it's easy for them to go to the banks, commercial banks, or their investors to raise the additional 30 to 40% required, and then they can deploy it to the site. So that's one typical example of how we engage for PPPs. The other one is through the NEP. So the NEP is not a typical PPP because we don't retain a stake, but that's also another way. So for the NEP, that's a Nigerian electrification project, what we do there is to give grants per connections. So everyone here, apart from Simon, has benefited from the grant at some point, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm happy that you...
Yes, you are saying the truth. We agree.
Awesome. And the reason for that is viability, right? Just having a good intention, asking investors to come into the space is not good enough, right? What the government decided to do was to demonstrate by putting out money to encourage the developers, one, and also create a viable model that could be sustainable. And the reason I say could, because it's up to the business model that is designed by the developer that will determine sustainability. Right, the grant won't determine sustainability. The grant will determine the viability of your project, but how you then sustain it is now up to you as a developer, right? So what that does basically is that we give $600 per connection. That's the rate that's being given today for the mini grids, and for the solar home system between 40 to 60% of the cost of the unit as performance-based grants or outputs-based grants. You have to deploy to qualify. That now brings us to the problem of how do you get financing to deploy, right? The government started a program called Solar Power Nigeria program that seeks to bring investors and connect them with developers so they can deploy and then access the grants. I think I'll talk a little bit about it. We have a matchmaking session planned in May, very strictly by invitation session, where we screen developers that are deal ready, put them in a room, and then we bring investors that are ready to invest. Not the ones that talk about we have money to invest, but those that are looking for a good pipeline to invest. Put them together and match make them. So we're doing that in May. So basically what we're trying to do in the space is we're being creative. The government doesn't really have to do all of this. But if you really want to increase energy access, you can't just sit by and do policy and wait for the grid to electrify the country. We have to come up with innovative ideas on how we can encourage developers to go into the space and also help their models by, giving some funding to create viability. And the next thing you asked about, how can they partner with REA? There's so many ways you can partner with REA. If you're a donor, TAs, technical advisory, you can provide intel to what locations, to the best technology. You can also support by providing consultants. You can also support by providing grants. So there may be some areas that we are not currently catering to that makes a good case. You can come and provide that grant. And also if you're an investor and you're looking to invest in the space, I know today we have 4 developers here, but there are hundreds of developers in Nigeria. And REA is that independent party that can connect you with any developer. We don't have a stake in their business. What's important to the REA is to increase energy access in the country, and we're hoping that we can take these numbers down from what you see, which I won't call, just reduce it and increase the energy, the energy access, which would then have a huge impact on the economy. So with more energy, people can produce more, more industries would be revitalized. There are new technologies like what Simon has spoken about, it just changes the entire economy, and we're open to doing that. We're doing that with a number. Just after this, just reach out and say you want to partner with the REA, or you're looking to do work in the space, in the off-grid space, or in partnership with the grid, because we also do what we call the interconnected mini grid, which is the grid and the off-grid coming together to deploy project. Thank you.
It's going on enough. Okay, thanks, Barbara. At this point, I want to throw it open to, to the audience for questions. Just before I do that, I want to also create a background to let you know that, yes, the Rural Electrification Agency have been doing a lot of work, also with their counterparts in the regulatory framework, the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission, and we also have NEMSA, who I believe that jointly with the Harry Hay, they've created a very fertile ground for investors. The kind of success that people are seeing right now in Nigeria wouldn't have been possible without what Harry and NEC and the rest have done in the government. The willpower politically to make sure that the industry is opened and to see that investors are protected, through the policies that are existing on tariffs, on recoupment of investment and others, are the things that had created those fertile grounds. So we have those existing right now. I'm sure if you reach out to us, we can share the links of where you can read the regulatories and policies concerning all this in Nigeria and we can take it further. So at this point, I'm going to throw it open to the floor to see if we have questions. When you're asking your questions, you can decide to direct to someone. If you don't direct it, I can help you direct it, but whichever one it is, whatever question you're trying to ask today, I can assure you that we would answer from this place. So it's question time. If you want to have questions, please, can I just see your hands up? Why are people doing like this? Okay, I see one. Please, you can go on, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Barbara and team. I'm Charles from Uganda. I just want to give a comment, but also I'd like to ask a question to them. In this journey about electrification, I'm really so happy that we're talking much about developers, talking about the state, we're talking about investors. I wanted to ask the team, do you envisage any opportunity or any contribution to the community into this journey? And if it's there, could it be having any add on issues that are probably challenging the process, like the affordability? I'm trying to wonder whether there could be something like that. Thank you.
Okay, anybody wants to answer? I hope you got the question. Okay.
No.
So I think the question, sir, if I may help you repeat, is that from the whole chain is the process whereby you give back to the community. Is that what you're trying to say? Involving the community in the process of doing this, right? Okay, great. So, Olu, please, I think because you work with the communities.
Absolutely. Thank you for that question. As I mentioned earlier in how we approach communities, we go into the community and try to identify two things. Is there any productive or commercial activities in that community? If there is, then we want to leverage that commercial activity as an anchor for the immediate community there. And because we have to balance the commercial viability of the project if we want the project to be sustainable in the long run. Now, for us to engage with the immediate community, we have to work with the local leadership in that community, carry them along, explain to them what we're looking to do, and also explain to them that, well, we're here, we want to build a system in this community that will provide them with power, not for 3 years of a grant-supported power, but if there's some grant supporting it, we want this power to be there for a longer term. So we have to find a way to ensure that they understand that they have to pay for this power, and we'll do our best to make sure that we get the power there, get some level of commercial viability on our project, but get some kind of agreement with them that they will pay for the power. In the long run, we can find additional ways to provide initiatives to support education, include them in the process of building the project, employing people within those communities, but we definitely carry them along at the beginning, even before we start building, And then once we have a good relationship there, then we'll now carry on the project.
Thank you. So, and to just add to it, you have to give it to the REA also. In the process of you being able to do the stuffs in the communities, they have an ESG guidelines, your community stakeholders engagement, your grievance redress mechanism, and some laid down rules that ensures that you're just, following the right principles. In fact, you can get some of the approvals that you need if you have not done all the engagements that you need to do. And you have to make sure that you've done it in line with the guidelines that the REA and the NERC has put down. So yes, we carry the community along, and we employ the guys and the communities who could do the things we want to do first. And I know that for some of us, most of us, we have operators in those sites who are from that community. Yeah. Any other question? Yeah, Jens.
Yeah, thank you. Just a quick comment first and then a question. So the comment was on the previous question, that we developed a knowledge product on community-based business model or delivery models for off-grid and DRE projects recently with the GIZ, GBE program. So I'd encourage to check that. And then the question was for Simon. About the carbon credits. So what buyers do you have so far, and where did you find them? Thank you.
Simon, is your mic working?
Okay, I think that's working now. Yeah, is it Jens? Nice to meet you, thanks. So yeah, carbon credits is a very interesting new source of finance that's a game changer. And it's the mechanisms that have made it a game changer have literally only come about pretty much since COP26, then COP27 improved various aspects, and then I think there's going to be some more kind of like modifications in COP28. And these kind of like changes within Article 6, and I think it's specifically Article 6.2 and 6.4, is what have now started to make, such a huge demand for carbon credits. Initially we were just focusing on how do we produce energy access, how do we add value. So I could say to you about 18 months ago, we weren't even aware of carbon credits. COP26 changed that. So what has happened in the world is that you'll see around 2020 big multinationals like Microsoft and Shopify and some of these other large organizations, they start to invest in a new class of carbon credits. You've got nature-based carbon credits. Everybody hears that you can plant forests and you'll probably get $5 a ton of CO2. You might have more, other forms, but they're all based on, everybody's heard of offsetting, and you might get $15 a ton of CO2 at the most. But what happened is that because of technology, again, and innovation, you've now got very interesting forms of carbon removal. And it's these new technologies that have made new forms of removing carbon from the atmosphere rather than just slowing the rate at which we put it into the atmosphere. So industry, when you're talking about commerce and industry, have been trying to make investments. So typically investment, you change your incandescent to LED light bulbs. And so you use maybe say 1/10 of the electricity. So instead of your carbon footprint going up like that, you've now slowed the rate at which you put carbon into the atmosphere. And that difference is the offset. And you can sell that offset to somebody else who is putting carbon into the atmosphere. However, the new technologies that have now come about and a lot of people are not aware of remove carbon from the atmosphere. And is it this week or within the last week, the IPCC has published a report on what we need to do as a global population to achieve net zero. All of the targets that have been signed up to by governments, including Nigeria, don't achieve net zero by 2100. Something drastic has to happen in order to do that. And that's where all of these new technologies, ours is one, yeah, that remove carbon from the atmosphere rather than just slowing the rate, is what you need to achieve net zero. So when they're making pledges of the amounts of money that need to be spent to achieve climate change, you need to look for carbon removal credits, which are priced at anywhere from $100 to $500 a ton to even a couple of $1,000s a ton. Because it's not just you're slowing the rate, you're not slowing the rate anymore, you're removing carbon, but the reason the price goes higher and higher is if I remove carbon for 50 years by planting a forest, that's not the same quality of carbon credit as if I remove carbon for 1,000 years. So our technology can remove carbon from the environment for between, the scientists will tell you, between 100 to 1,000 years. And that means the price of the carbon credits that we can sell is going to be far different to other carbon credit prices. Now, when you've got access to that kind of finance, and I've heard of deals where they've sold 10 years worth, like 50,000 carbon credits. So they've sold 10 years worth of carbon credit production, and that will generate for a project developer like $5 million. And that $5 million can be used to set up your energy infrastructure in rural locations. Not just your energy infrastructure, but your productive equipment that's now going to add value to what you're producing as a rural community. There's a huge opportunity here for renewable energy and agriculture and the climate change crisis to come together and really, like I said, the Industrial Revolution will just look like a warm-up act in comparison to what can happen because of the amount of money that needs to be spent to save the whole of humanity. So, yeah, we produce those kind of carbon credits, which are carbon removal, not offset.
Thanks, Simon. So we have a question in front, and I will be looking forward to more information on what you've just shared, Simon, at COP28 in Dubai. It's thought-provoking to see that there are extractive technologies, and I really want to look forward to it. Yes, Nicole.
Yeah, thanks. Well, thank you, everybody. Look, a few years ago, well, some years ago, I remember there was, wow, Nigeria is the best mini-grid regulation. And I want to believe that many of the things we are talking about today are also part of that. So I wanted, as both from the private sector as well as Barbara point of view, some years later, are there any of those aspects where, because I understand regulation needs to evolve, no? Together with, so Barbara, you were talking about many financial instruments. I wanted to get a bit your point of view on those regulations. So how important were they, because also there are other countries in this room, so how important were they? What would you like to see maybe improved in the next round? And then maybe a bit here about, because we are talking about affordability, you're talking about RBF, we haven't yet talked about tariffs, so maybe have a bit an idea of the kind of tariffs you can use in your businesses.
So I'll let Barbara speak to the public side of it, and I'll speak to the private side and try to touch on tariff.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Please. The mic.
Okay. So we'll talk about the regulations. So we have the mini-grid regulations, which you probably are aware of. And I know last year they started the process of reviewing it, right? You can't have a regulation for 20 years without reviewing it. So with the changes in the sector and with the improvements we've seen so far, the regulator started the process, started a hearing actually, stakeholder hearing on areas of strengthening and how that would impact moving forward. So what we had has brought us thus far, but moving forward there are many changes megawatt hours for the mini grids, and a number of things that are being reviewed or being considered for review at the moment. They are in the works, so it's hard to speak to most of those things, but RA has made some inputs and attended a lot of those sessions, and I think the private sector as well attended the sessions, as well as other government representatives. I think we've gotten to the point where we don't have a document that fits fix the entire space. We're always in a review. After a few years, we go back and realize that these terms you agreed to now are now obsolete and we need to upgrade it. And so we've been going through that, not just for the NERC regulations, but other aspects of the electricity sector. Some of the regulations, policy documents are being reviewed, even within the RA as well, to reflect current trends and expectations. You spoke about the tariff. So, tariff for the grid and off-grid is different. However, NERC sets a bandwidth or sets a leeway for the developers, mini-grid developers, giving them room to play around, right? It's not to say they can just arbitrarily set their own tariff. They have to go through, use the MITO, right? You've had to use the MITO to get the approval. So that shows what your capex is and all of those assumptions, and that gives an approved tariff. Even with the approved tariff, there's a range they allow, right? But initially when I saw them, I'm like, oh well, people will go and change the tariff, but if they charge high, no one will buy the power. That's what fixed the system, right? If you charge too high, then people just won't turn off their bulbs, and the developer will suffer because they have investors to pay, they have to operate and maintain the system. So it's to their own advantage that they even go below where necessary. And I've seen that happen a lot of times. You see cases where developers started with a certain price and later they just cut it in half. You know what? Just come and use the power. And over time, they gradually increase it when they see that they have the demand, ready for it. So I think having it in paper and implementing it is very different. It actually changes, and I'm sure they will speak to that as well. And what did you ask again? I think that's it. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Barbara. So I'll speak with it to this from the developer's angle on the practical side. In terms of regulations, of course, we have the NERC, which is the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission, being the custodian of the Regulatory Commission and regulatory documents and policies. So I'll just touch on some brief highlights that might be of interest to the investors and people that want to know towards investment. So the first thing is, in terms of investing in mini grids in Nigeria and the fear of the grid getting to where you have invested, like we've seen in some other parts of Africa, that's a spiraled problem. The Nigeria Mini Grid Regulation from NERC has protected the mini grid developer from the fear of the grid getting to you. Number one, by stating the kilometers distance between you and the grid from the time you want to invest. So you got to keep that kilometers. Number two is by stating how much the grid guys would make you whole with if they desire to come to where you are. So maybe you have developed the mini grid there and it's now buoyant, and the guys that were 20 kilometers away want to come near you now and tap from it. NERC is saying, there's no problem. Your total capex plus X amount must be paid to you if the grid guys want you to remove your asset. So you're protected with your investment. They're saying, secondly, okay, if they think they don't want to have you go, they can come to a partnership platform with you and say, hey, continue running it, but we want to sell generation to you also. So you convert from it being isolated to being interconnected mini grid. Now the interconnected mini grid by regulation also it's a good one, and the sweet spot is there is a meter between you and the grid. Whatever the grid sells to you, you give them one check, you know. So, and you coexist. So it protects on that side in terms of location and investment. Now, on the side of tariff, yes, like she said, we have a multi-year tariff order, which is what we call MITO, MYTO. Now, the beauty of the MITO tariff is that it comes in an Excel model template. And another fantastic stuff about it is that it's fully cost reflective. So it's not a speculative figure or a cap figure that they just say, okay, you guys, you must all charge 30 cents. No. So you load your capex into this model. And it has another separate angle if you have subsidies from the Barbara and the rest of the world, where you put what your grant or your subsidy figure is. Now, once you put that grant or subsidy in that cell, in the cell where you have tariff, it changes. So it takes the subsidy in and reduces the tariff figure that you have in the cell that speaks to your tariff. Now you share this entire model with any RC to get an approval to say, I want to charge this tariff. You must now have that approval before you can go back to go do your work. Now, like what she has said, most of the times when we finish inputting into this MITO model, we are unable to charge the full tariff that the MITO has advised us because of affordability. So we come back with the MITO tariff into our financial model to find, you know, a kind of market-driven balance break even. So for example, if the MITO tariff is telling us to charge 65 cents, and you know that if you're going to charge 65 cents with this guy, they'll rather stick to their candles or stick to their petrol generator, which is currently at maybe it's about 55 cents. So we come back and say, okay, yeah, we know that we got approval for 65, but we charge 30, we charge 40. Then we now build in our 15-year model inflationary rates that helps us to go towards the place where we have our approval. Now, the truth about it is that you cannot charge a tariff that is above the figure that you already have in that cell. But to really put it out right, the REA, the NERC, and the other parastatals of Nigeria federal government has done rightly with this tariff model. If you operate an optimized grid, like Olu said, number one, your community is well chosen. Number two, you have your productive stuff, like he said. If you optimize your grid, from my experience, I mean, I'm saying as a developer, without a grant, you break even by 7th to 8th year, commercially. So I can share figures. I have said it at different events. Is mini grid commercially viable? Yes. If anybody wants to argue with me, show me your mini grid. Well, if you're coming from some studies, from Oxford, some studies, from some South Africa, some studies, from papers, don't argue with me. I'll come with the figures of my mini grid, my ARPU, my expenses. You come with yours. Then we'll also share how you chose your community and your engineering design. Very key. If you go design and the renewable fraction of your grid is 50% and diesel fraction is killing you, you can be profitable. So at this point, do we still have any question? Oh, now they're popping up. We have, because I'll come back, because after these questions, I'm just coming back for final words so that we wrap up. I know people like to ask questions, right? So, okay, so let's have a question.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Nina from Student Energy. So I was very curious when Barbara mentioned about the Forex issue and how it's a problem when you're receiving when you're receiving your financing in a foreign currency and you're doing your EPC in another currency. So how is that problem managed? I mean, it would be great to hear from the developers as well if there are any solutions that they... And you too, Barbara. Yes, yes. So if there are any solutions that exist for that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I was trying to dodge that one. But there are a number of things, and the reason I threw it out there is reality, right? If you take a facility from France to give you euros, right? Nigeria will spend naira. What works is a blend, is having local financing as well as foreign financing, right? If you can't get all local financing, then you need some foreign financing. Then your exposure is limited. It's not 100% dollar funded or euro funded, right? And the portion that is naira funded, you get a good rate for that, then it helps your entire business model. So that's what I've used in my past investment life as well. And that's what we advise the developers to use also. And that's why we're trying to help them get local currency funding for a significant percentage of the investment. Again, we still need to take into consideration is that they import a lot of this equipment, so they need the forex, right? And it's easy for them to tell their investors to pay the OEMs directly. So we can't say, no, don't get foreign investment into the country, and we can't say get all foreign investment. But a blend helps you manage the risk better, then your exposure is limited. There are ways to hedge, which may be costly, but there are some institutions that would give you forex and allow you pay naira because they have other uses of naira. And these are the kind of some of the investors that I'm looking for to introduce to the developers. Thank you.
Yeah, sure, I can. So, yeah, so this is a real problem, and really, the truth is that's the elephant in the room that you always have to at some point in the conversation. But given I've had to experientially manage this type of thing before, I can say there are several ways around it. But before that, what is really the issue? One, the naira depreciates faster. That's one. Second is, so that one is an issue in itself, but, well, can be managed really commercially. Second is the availability of availability of forex in Nigeria. So that is existential and is a macro issue, but frankly, that's temporal. A lot of people don't believe it, but it is. So that is temporal, and there are temporal ways to manage that. So for the first one, I think you can handle commercially. And I'm talking purely from a C&I perspective, right? So for an example, what we have done in our experience is, one, we look at commercially competitive tariffs where we're doing USD index tariffs. So yeah, you're paying me naira and it's fine, but you probably would index it to the dollar at every point in time. So I can receive your naira, but I'll receive the dollar equivalent. So I can look for, outside the official source to get the dollar. Okay, and that's possible if we have operational projects that run like this, right? And the other is you look at tariffs in a manner that you're not being managed by, you are able to escalate, right? Similar to what is being done, but there's no limit on it, so you can escalate based on CPI, and that's also doable, okay? And I think with these two models, you'd see that in the long run, really, for an equity investor, shouldn't be a big deal, right? For a debt investor, definitely liquidity is a challenge. So the FX, the second issue, which is really temporal but existential, is really a problem. Okay, and frankly, if you commercially manage that and you are able to, in USD terms, you are able to still get the returns that you intend to get, and you meet the DSCRs, etc., you're pretty good. And these are things that have been demonstrated, right? So you're looking at, you take some part of the naira you have made from your clients, right? You go to the bank, you get USD, you won't get all, okay? You take some, you go to the open market, you get. But from a balanced point of view, you're still able to meet that. And if you can demonstrate this, right, not all investors are bullish, but a few things in my experience, I've spoken to a couple of them, is one, this is temporary. So again, yes, we can both assume that, oh, this might happen till eternity, but that's not true. But let's agree that that does. But you now look at what I have modeled to say, I factored all those things in, and these are the ways I have mitigated it. And usually you see, when you demonstrate that, as long as the investor is ready to do business, you would understand that you know the market and you understand. And literally in the realistic, from a realistic standpoint, right, in the actual implementation, this is how it's done, okay? So I think I just use this opportunity to try to indulge the investor community, because it's always a resounding, oh, how are you dealing with the FX crisis? And of course we know what it is, but again, it's not just for Nigeria market. And yeah, FX is a risk, but you look at other markets in West Africa, Mali, the political risk, and business is still being done, right? So there are ways around managing this to make sure that you're giving optimal returns to the company and then to the investors who are trying to put their money in to do this. So yeah, that's it.
Olu, can you spend 10 seconds, please? Because we're running out of time.
I will, because both of you have captured the bulk of it. I just want to add an experiential element to it, which is we had one of our mini grids we funded with USD, and after a significant change in the exchange rate, we already had it in the commercial agreement with the mini grid community. We went back to them because of the relationship we built with them, and also having that agreement in place. We were able to increase the tariff by 20%, and they are still lining up. We still have more people in line trying to connect to our mini grid today.
Great.
So that's just to give an example to it.
Okay, great. So I'm going to take 1, 2, Nema. Oh, I have only 5 minutes. So I take only 2 now. You still want to ask a question? So 30 seconds. I have 1.8. Okay, so I can take you again. I take, please, Mr. Obina. Okay, you already have the mic. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I'm directing this question to Barbara and Ayo. In a scenario of interconnected mini grid or a concessional mini grid, that's talking with the DISCO, how easy is it to perfect this agreement? Or are there standing regulation that we can enforce it on?
Okay, thank you. The second question, we've noted it.
Yeah, it's not necessarily a question. It's more kind of a call for you, for the association, but also for the REA to engage further with government. You know, at Electrify, as you know, we've been investing quite a bit in Nigeria. We're super eager to continue doing so. Obviously, Forex, you know, fluctuation on the exchange rate has been an issue, but not only for you, for us as well. And the issue is not only because at the end of the day it's reflected towards the client, as you said, which cannot be, you know, pushed forward, you know, indefinitely towards the client. It needs to be fixed in a way to make sure that we have viable, you know, assets operating long term, capable to service not only Naira-based facility, but also USD or Euro or shillings, whatever the currency of the facility is. There is a need to fix it. And for me, actually, the lack of foreign investment coming in nowadays is really the issue that needs to be fixed to allow that to flow in. That's one. And the queuing currently at the INE window makes it extremely difficult for, honestly, for foreign investors to just wait and to have access to the official rates. So many of them are going for the black market. And when you see, obviously, the gap between the black and the official market that has increased, well, hopefully, with the elections and possibly a new devaluation coming up, I guess that the gap will reduce. But again, the gap will reduce, but the price, the difference in price will need to be pushed back to the client again. So it's kind of a never-ending story where if we need to sustain an asset, we need to fix the problem. Otherwise, actually, long-term, we have an issue. Thank you.
Noted. The third question.
I suppose my question really is on your point and to the association. I'm just wondering, why is it not possible that with economies of scale that you buy in Naira?
Okay, that's the question, right?
Yeah.
Okay, Barbara, do you want to just wrap up?
Thank you. The man in the red cap, I think we can discuss later on the particular agreement, because it's hard to know what agreement needs to be perfected, and then we can take it up and use our stakeholder, connect to resolve that. And then edify, point taken, all your points taken, great to see you again, all the points taken, and we have the same worries as well. But we hope it will be fixed very soon. Regarding the purchase in Naira, I think she's Nigerian, right? She's not. Oh, you're not? Interesting. Yes. We agree.
So at some point, you need to use your power.
I think we agree. It's a good thing that it's an African problem, so we all need to use our power to solve this problem. It's not just for one party. Once we can have regional manufacturing hubs, it makes a better case. And then also within country manufacturing hubs, that would help. For now, everyone is buying out of Africa, which is also a problem for us. So we need to fix Africa so we can be buying amongst ourselves to help the market. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think she's almost rounded it up. I'm just going to say that, look, the opportunities are leveraging. African carbon market is out. Your Hyrex can be in that place. We have AFTA trying to trade across Africa. For Quentin, yes, we're trying to tackle dollar. Some two good news will happen over the next few months. Of course, we have the Dangote refinery taking up all this buying petrol from outside. And we also have the new government. We are hopeful and see what it's going to be. Thank you, everybody, for taking time out to wait. It's been a great session. Have a great evening.
I knew it was going to be fantastic.
Schneider Electric a créé en 2009 un programme d'accès à l'électricité dans le cadre de sa responsabilité sociale. Et ce programme comporte 3 volets. Un volet formation. On a pour objectif de former 1 million de jeunes au métier d'électricien. Un volet business. Donc on a développé une gamme de produits spécifiques pour l'accès à l'électricité. Et puis un volet investissement avec toute une activité dans le cadre du développement de fonds d'investissement à impact dédiés à l'accès à l'électricité. Alors on est vraiment très heureux d'être aujourd'hui à Abidjan à l'événement organisé par l'EAIF. Pour nous, cet événement est vraiment l'événement majeur de l'écosystème de l'accès à l'électricité. C'est le seul endroit où on peut rencontrer aussi bien des entreprises que des financeurs, que des organisations multilatérales, des associations, les gouvernements aussi. Et tout cet écosystème nous permet de nouer des partenariats. Ça nous paraît vraiment important d'être là et de soutenir cet événement pour qu'il puisse continuer à exister et à se développer. Schneider Electric a créé en 2009 un programme d'accès à l'électricité dans le cadre de sa responsabilité sociale. Et ce programme comporte 3 volets. Un volet formation. On a pour objectif de former 1 million de jeunes au métier d'électricien. Un volet business. Donc on a développé une gamme de produits spécifiques pour l'accès à l'électricité. Et puis un volet investissement avec toute une activité dans le cadre du développement de fonds d'investissement à impact dédiés à l'accès à l'électricité.